Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Web3 Native Podcast. Today, we're going into one of the most critical topics of Web3, which is smart accounts, safe, and the future of mass AA adoption. And of course, who better to speak about this than Lukas, who's a co founder of Safe? Hello, Lukas.
Thanks for having me, Shita.
All right. I'm really excited about this conversation because in the past, we have actually explored a related topic or talked about safe already, right? We had Stefan on and he talked about the history of Gnosis and how we came to build safe. We spoke to Tarun from CoinShift and explored how DAOs are actually using safe. It was more from a perspective of DAOs. But more recently, the idea of smart accounts and account extraction has just taken over Web3. And it is now obvious that it's going to be one of the most important pieces. So, in order for us to visualize that, I want to just take us to the future a little bit. The year is 2020 something, let's say 25, 26, 27. And we're in the middle of the next bull cycle, right? dApps are mainstream. Everybody's using smart accounts. Lukas, can you walk us through that user journey? What does it look like? What does it feel like?
Yeah. So actually, when we did a spin-off of Safe last year, so Safe is a spin-off from Gnosis, we sat together and said, what's really the long-term mission we want to achieve as a team? And there we said by 2030, it's a little bit more longer time horizon, but by 2030, we want that every account in Web3 should be a smart account. So no matter whether it's like an account of a DAO, whether it's an account of a company, of an individual, like all of them should be smart accounts. So we set ourselves this long-term goal. Now, about 1.5 years later, I actually think it was not ambitious enough. I think we will be there much faster. Like a couple of things came together. Obviously, the entire excitement about ERC-4337 and the terminology around account abstraction that popped up, and a lot of people suddenly seeing the same vision and contributing to that. Also, the faster enhancement of layer 2s that just enable smart accounts because they add gas overhead, and that's usually only justified on layer 2s. And so, yeah, let's say in 2027, 6, 7, there will be all accounts will be smart accounts. How will this look like? This means that as a user, when you start using Web3, you might not even realize that you use Web3 at the beginning at all. So you might just use, be it like a social application, a messaging platform, a game, and you might use it like you use Web2, like a traditional game or something that there's not much of a difference. You log in with your email account, you log in with Apple ID or something like this, and you get assigned under the hood a smart account. And that's one of the things that's enabled through smart accounts, that you can have these progressive security implementations where you start off with something that might not be the ideal end case scenario. So like maybe just a simple MPC key that's controlling your account and controlled through your social logins. But then as you start playing the game, you accumulate assets. As you start like interacting with other Web3 applications, and you actually have gain attestations, assets, whatever, you build up an identity and it becomes more valuable. Then you can change from this very simple like social login system to maybe a more advanced system where you have like the hardware device that's securing your account, or you have a multi-factor set up. But just this progressive security allows people to just onboard much more easily to Web3, as said, without even knowing that Web3 is used under the hood, and just expose the technicalities at the later point when they actually become relevant. And this means that Web3 can just immerse itself much more in our daily life without being too intrusive. So we might just use our regular applications, and there might be some Web3 aspect to it, but it will not be as obvious as it is today.
Absolutely. I hear you talking about making it invisible. So that's speaking about UX, and if you're talking about security and progressive security, how we can add those on. And in the past, we kind of had that, but then it was a centralized alternative, right? People were like, hey, we can make blockchain invisible, but what ended up happening is people just created Coinbase accounts, Binance accounts, and you do trading, you do staking, you do every launch pad, like all the stuff you need to do, you do it through centralized. And now you can do the same and have the same experience from a non-custodial, self-sovereign way. And in fact, of course, and everybody's talking about this. Among the many people is, of course, Vitalik himself, and he has written a blog post about the three transitions, and all three of them, he writes, are non-negotiable. All three are mandatory for mass adoption to come. And of course, one key pillar there is smart contract wallets. He wrote there that without smart contract wallets, people will be uncomfortable using Web3 apps, and they will end up defaulting to centralized exchanges. Where do you think? Why did he make that point? Is it a combination of this UX and security? Are there other aspects that make it mandatory?
Mm. Yeah, and Vitalik actually explicitly said Ethereum would fail if this doesn't happen. So that's quite some strong words, that if we don't transition users to smart contract wallets or smart accounts, that Ethereum would fail as it is, because people would just default back to centralized solutions, and like it becomes like a pseudo decentralized system, but at the front end where it's actually relevant, it's all like centralized players after all. And I think this is definitely a combination of user experience and security, which leads to that. Like if you look at current self-custodial wallets, like the first thing, like you download an app or you download a browser extension, and then the user is asked to write down this 12-word seed phrase on a piece of paper or whatever, and store it somewhere secure, but not too secure that you forget where you stored it 5 years later. So that's like obviously like a huge UX hurdle, but it also introduces like security risk. Like you have this 12 words. If someone else gets these 12 words, they can just withdraw all the assets from your account. It's a single point of failure. There's no backup like recovery mechanism besides this one seed phrase. So smart contract wallet like just open up the solution space massively. Like it leads to this like Cambrian explosion of like a lot of different solutions that address different UX and security challenge within Web3. One thing I mentioned before with the easy onboarding, that you have like a seedless onboarding where maybe at the beginning there's some custodial or semi-custodial aspect to it. Maybe the game provider has also some key and cosign transactions for you, that in case you lose the key, they can still give you back access to your account, and the key is then stored in a less secure manner, maybe locally on your computer and abstracted away from the user. So the UX of onboarding can be massively improved. Also, the UX around gas. So it's still quite some learning curve until you understand how to manage gas in a way that your transactions don't get stuck, or like you're not overpaying, and like even though there have been some improvements there.
And you have to get the tokens in the first place, right? Without
Exactly.
gas, you can't start doing anything. Yeah.
And it's so weird because you don't go to like a regular website and then you're asked to have some like AWS credits to pay for the AWS bills that the website which is hosted somewhere is causing. So this is also somehow like these minor fees are abstracted away in Web 2. So some third parties subsidizing the costs of running an application, of using the application, and it's somehow through another way, the cost is then subsidized. And I think that's also where we're directionally going in Web3, that these gas fees are paid by third parties that have an interest in these transactions happening. Say if I make a swap on Uniswap, and Uniswap actually has some revenue mechanism that creates a profit out of this trade. Like they have a big interest that this transaction is happening, and they would be perfectly fine to pay for the comparatively low transaction fees. And if this increases the user experience for user and it attracts more usage, I think that's where we're definitely going. But also on the security side, there's much that can be done with smart contract wallets around recovery, for example. Vitalik Buterin often says this like social recovery as a prime use case there, that you may still have a private key, but you also have a group of friends or family that can recover your account. As like this has been done already long time ago by Argent. They have this Argent Guardians system where you can nominate like other people, like friends and family, to be recover in your account. I'm personally not 100% convinced this is really the one and only recovery solutions that we will have. I think many people would rather have like a trusted third party, be it like a financial institution, an insurance, or something like this, like a custodian, be a recover of that account. Because putting the trust on your friends and family, like it's also a lot of responsibilities. You need to trust that these people know how to do proper OPSEC around their recovery keys. And yeah, I think there's just going to be like more of a spectrum of different solutions around recovery that will be done. But also what's nice about smart contract wallets is that you can delegate individual responsibilities to different stakeholders. So it's not just the recovery responsibility or functionality. You can also say, whenever I do a transaction, I want to have some third party be able to like intervene if they see that this transaction is malicious or I got scammed or something like this. So they cannot trigger themselves transaction on my account, but they can flag transactions and say, this is maybe something you should do a second look at. And yeah, there's, I said, like there's going to be a huge explosion of different solutions that leverage the programmability of smart contract wallets and like just surface these new solutions. And then it's more like the market that will decide which of these security and UX solutions will actually be the ones that will be adopted.
Right. There's so much to unpack there. I think you just rattle off like 5-6 different use cases. If I may just take 1 minute to step back, right? We spoke about like a account extraction. We also you mentioned smart contract wallets many times. Safe is trying to push the idea of smart accounts, and there's also this ERC 4337 term being bandied about. If we can just take a step back and just explain very quickly what these different terms mean. Are there like subtle differences, or do we just use all of them interchangeably at this point?
Yeah, I think our industry is quite good at coming up with terminology that's that has nice memeable abbreviations, but doesn't mean much to like regular people. It's like NFT, DAO, like and now like AA might be some of this, like account abstraction. It's like one term that gained a lot of momentum because it's also like it has this like AA abbreviation, which sounds quite interesting. But yeah, I'll try to untangle the different terminology there. Maybe starting with smart accounts. So we have this like primary type of account in Ethereum chains. That is the private key account. So that's like low level on the consensus layer of the blockchain. It's like a hard coded type of account, which just says like accounts are controlled by a private key. And if you have private key, yeah, you can do transactions on the account. If you don't have the private key, you cannot do transactions. So like very binary logic in a sense. And then there's this second type of account, which is a smart contract account. So every smart contract that's deployed is also an account on the blockchain. And the idea there that and these are, we call it smart accounts because you can create user-based accounts. So it's not a smart contract that's like an AMM, but it's actually a smart contract that represents a user on the blockchain. So it holds the assets of the user. It defines the access control for the user, like under what circumstances can the user trigger transactions. So you lift all the logic from these like private key accounts that are in the consensus layer on the smart contract layer. And this then just allows the accounts to be actually smart, like that you can program different functionalities into them. they can behave differently for different users. So it can be like a more corporate account that has hierarchies. It can be an individual account that maybe focuses more on like two-factor authentication and social recovery and these things. So that's the smart account, just smart contract-based accounts. And then often used interchangeably is smart contract wallets. So there's already for a long time been a lot of controversy about the term wallets because it's even with private key accounts, it's controversial. Like it's wallet is not just about like money; it's also about identity. And like there's a huge debate about whether we should have gone down this road of using wallets. But anyways, like I would say the difference to smart accounts is that wallets, smart contract wallets, are more about the user interface. So how do you interact with your smart account, be it like through some software or through an embedded wallet in an application? So that's that. And then account abstraction, which is probably the term most people have heard already in the past months, is more about the initiatives to make these smart accounts first-class citizens within Ethereum. So because private key accounts have been hard-coded on the consensus layer, they're pretty much a standard. Like everyone accepts them. It's they're like the blockchain is optimized for them in a way. And account abstraction is a collection of efforts to alleviate the smart accounts to be on the same level as private key accounts, because right now smart accounts still need at some point in the transaction lifecycle a private key to actually pay for the transaction fees, because that's how the blockchain works on a low level. And one of the efforts to change that is ERC 4337, where you say that technically there's still some private key involved in a bundler. So that's why it's like an application level change. It's not yet like native account abstraction, but the user doesn't need to have a private key anymore. So they can just have the transaction built themselves, and then they pass it into this decentralized network of bundlers, and they then have the logic to execute the transaction on chain. And there's a whole bunch of other efforts like ERC 1271, which deals more about how can smart accounts sign messages, and ERC 6900 or like 3074, or like how can a private key migrate into a smart account. Like there's a bunch of different initiatives that collectively make account abstraction, even though usually the focus is mostly on this ERC 4337, which was kickstarting the excitement about the account abstraction. It's also the one that, and end of last year, it was like pushed quite a lot from the Ethereum Foundation. They built up a team around building up this ERC 4337 ecosystem. But we at Safe think that like 4337 will be the start of a lot of things we have to do to really achieve account abstraction. Because it's also going to be like a wicked problem. Like moving to smart contract wallets will actually introduce new challenges. They like new risks. Like if suddenly every account is smart contract. I mean, we know how it works with DeFi protocols and bridges that are smart contracts. They get hacked all the time, and we should not go into the same direction where smart accounts are like on a weekly basis being exploited. That's an entire rabbit hole itself with the challenges that will come with account abstraction. But
All right. Yeah. So we have evolved a long way from like just calling it like, hey, smart contract wallets, now to like making it smart by implying more modules and having components like ERC-4337, which abstract away the gas component, the signing component, but ultimately everybody's pushing towards the larger goal of account extraction, where it's, as we discussed, like invisible to the user or seamless for the user, right? And although that introduces new questions, it is a concerted effort be it from like a standard standpoint, everybody agreeing to like enable or accepting signing of like smart contract wallets, building modules, making sure it's secure, and so on. And so let's go into what it looks like today, right? You mentioned quite a few possibilities just now, be it from the signing perspective, making it such that you don't need wallets, you just use your email or you just use your Apple ID. And then we spoke about the kind of multi-sig / security, right? As I want to recover, I can have social recovery. I could have like semi-custodial setup with the application, or maybe my government, my bank, whoever it is. I can also add now more functionalities that is specific for my use case. So what does the landscape look like today for the safe ecosystem modules, or more broadly, the modules for account extraction? Are there certain leading examples that you are most excited about? They're live and usable today.
Yeah. So the way how Safe initially got traction is through like the multi-signature functionality. So you just have a way for not just one private key to control an account, but it's actually multiple private keys, and you have a threshold of like how many of those you need to make transactions. And that was taking off for a lot of teams that wanted a higher security standard for their treasuries. A lot of these teams then became more community driven, and they needed to have ways for not just like a small group of people, like a founding team, to control assets, but actually a much wider audience of token holders. So because we saw also that like accounts, they shouldn't be put in stone, and they need to stay flexible. Like as the usage of an account like evolves, you might start with like having some assets on the account, and then you accumulate more assets, or suddenly there's like a soul bound token on the account which you don't dare to lose, and just the risk appetite and the balance between user experience versus security always changes, and different access control schemes kind of need to work in parallel. So that's why Safe from the beginning was designed as a modular smart account. So we start off having like a multi-sig account, but then you can add modules to this account that have their own logic, their own functionality, and that just augment what the account can do. So one example there, one of the earliest examples actually how this was used in like production or widely, was the Zodiac reality module. So that's describing a little bit the progression I talked before about the team, the core team decentralizing itself and having a community take ownership of assets of a treasury. So like a safe can be augmented with this Zodiac reality module, which then allows a snapshot space, so a place where decision making is done, usually in the DAO context, with a decentralized community. How these decisions can then be translated into transactions on the account in a trustless manner. So the Zodiac reality module basically takes an oracle, which then tells what action has been decided upon by the community and executes that via transaction on the safe. And then this allows this kind of progressive decentralization of a community. There's other modules that have been built and used in production, like the spending limit module. We use this ourselves. We have a safe that we use within the team to make payments, and the spending limit module allows you to delegate allowances to other parties, and they don't have to be signers in this account. They don't have to be one of the multi-sig signers. They can be completely independent. Then you just say this other person with its own wallet has access to withdraw or send up to a certain amount of assets per day, per week, per year, whatever. And we use this within the team to say we have like obviously bigger transactions. We want to have consensus within the team. that not suddenly someone from the team is running away with all the money. But for smaller transactions, we actually have budgets, and different people can have different budgets, and they can then execute independently without asking the others for permission. And they get these spending limits on the account of like few thousand USDC per month, for example. And this just creates much more efficient processes within a team. Then there's other interesting modules that have been built that are dealing more with cross-chain functionality. So how can one account control another account on a different chain via an arbitrary message bridge? So you have this AMB module, which you can attach to your safe and say this other safe on this other chain is actually controlling me through this message bridge. And this allows you to trigger a transaction on one chain, but execute it then on a different chain. Like other things that, like besides also the recovery functionality
Are
we
these
talked about.
in-house built by Safe, or which parts of these that you just mentioned, like the spending limits and the AMB, are built by Safe versus external modules?
Yeah, so actually the spending limits is the only one we've built within the team. That's a cool thing about these modules is that anyone can build them, and that you can use modules that someone else built as long as they're like open source and deployed on the chain. The challenge is obviously how can I trust someone else's code? So if teams create these modules and put them out for everyone else to use, like we need to find ways to have people feel confident about using this, because only then we start having these, like actually this ecosystem where people can contribute these modules and how to use them, and like there's composability in that. If you've seen like an audit for the smart contract code, it's you probably trust it, but it should be a more or less it shouldn't need trusted environment to really make this work. Because the problem is that, or kind of the challenge is that these modules obviously they have certain access to your account. So it's like installing an application on your computer. Obviously, you can build a permissioning system that says like this application can be installed, but it cannot suddenly wipe my entire hard drive or something. Like there's some level of permissioning system that has to be implemented there, that then allows people to activate these extensions to install these modules. That's something we're currently planning to build out, because we've seen teams building modules and using them themselves, but we haven't yet seen this what's going to be quite powerful, like this like ecosystem of like different teams building and using someone else's modules.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I love that we are already talking about this modular future, right? And in fact, recently we wrote a piece about the future of account extraction, and we have a few key predictions of like what transitions we'll see. The first key one is that we're going to see a much more modular system, right? Where not everybody can build everything. And why do you want to rebuild everything yourself, right? Hey, there's a secure multisig that has withstood the test of time, which is safe, and let's use that for all the high value transactions or high value assets. And then we can use that. We can use other modules, right, for signing, for and then certain like logic modules, like you said, which could be around social recovery, could be around like transaction checking, around like scam preventions, and then on the execution side as well. Let's say with paymaster and bundler or certain like kind of relays, you don't always have to build everything yourself, right? And that's where we foresee that some of these modules, as they gain more adoption through either wallets or users directly, then you start to build up network effects. And also the more users use them, the more we get to trust them. And so they build up linear effect, right? So partly overcomes hopefully some of the security concerns, because if everybody's building your own new module, you need to get audited again and battle test it again, and
Exactly.
you might introduce new vulnerabilities there. The other the second transition that we have predicted is that because now we have all these different modules, now you can almost kind of pick and choose what you want and assemble that together to form specialized smart accounts for different purposes. And we have kind of seen that already for example, Safe itself, even the vanilla multisig. We have seen, for example, CoinShift built sort of like a front end, and I know they've gone a little bit down the stack, but all the features and UX is tailored towards large organizations, large DAOs. How can you do payroll? How can you do accounting and like audits and so on, and handle many different subdivisions and payroll and different people and roles who will need to handle that. And that has become really popular among the large organizations. Now, we've also seen other wallets that can specialize into, let's say, NFT collectors and making sure they can like discover the NFTs or like simulate certain transactions, delegate things so they can claim airdrops and so on. We might see other new wallets come up specialized in things like gaming. You might need session keys so that you just sign in once and you can sign many transactions throughout that session of gaming, or DeFi focused ones, which might have even more optimizations around things like MEV or privacy if I'm going to use it for different purposes. So in terms of specialization and like we're getting closer to that application level, what do you see today in the landscape, and what role does Safe play in that landscape now?
Yeah, and I definitely recommend anyone to read that article because I thought it was very well researched and very thorough.
Thank you.
Like, yeah, exactly. Like the modularity enables this specialization. So you have that's actually important that like this specialization comes through like a modular approach, because like you could also have like these specialization by saying like I just built a completely new smart account and it's very good at like targeting like the gaming use case, or like it's this social media kind of smart account, and or like a DeFi specialized. And but then as you say, like we get into this world where we build just we duplicate too much of the functionality, and this creates huge security risk because every line of smart contract code that's written is like should be minimized as much as possible. So that's why we believe that like smart accounts will be not specialized, so they will be general purpose. But the smart wallets, so smart contract wallets, on top of that, they should then be specialized by using like kind of piecing together the different modules of the smart account. So there's like smart account should just be unopinionated of how it's going to be used, but then the modules add this specialization, which then the smart contract wallet packages into one unified solutions. And we see projects leveraging that, like Brahma, that builds like a DeFi-oriented solution that uses like modules to automate things and to just optimize more on efficient treasury management. And we see other solutions that specialize on more like individuals. So how can we leverage smart accounts to make like easy onboarding, to create good recovery mechanisms? One is definitely Linen Wallet, which has been building on such a solution on Safe for a while. Another one is like WorldCoin, and a lot of people don't know this, but every WorldCoin account like is a Safe in the end, and they plan this not just like to use it as a way to streamline UX by abstracting away the gas and having gasless transactions, but also in the long run to have recovery, because obviously your identity is like the most important thing, and this is like you can use money, but and that can be very bad. But if you lose an identity, like this can be detrimental. So you can think of WorldCoin like this, what you want. It's controversial, but obviously they made a good decision there, relying on smart accounts.
How many smart accounts has WorldCoin set up by now? They have like millions of users, right? And I know they were setting up on L2s, and they will eventually have their own L2 as well. They must represent a significant portion of all smart accounts right now.
Yeah, I think over 3 million right now. So they are the project that's creating the most smart accounts at the moment.
That's insane. So we can imagine, like you said, the future where every person in the world, or every user, internet user, hopefully, if Web3 transcends our little circle and takes over the internet, that every person and especially if they have a WorldCoin ID or some sort of proof of humanity, will have a smart account behind it, right?
Yeah, I think every person will have multiple smart accounts even.
Yes. So the role of Safe then, like in this landscape of like different modules and different specializations, you kind of alluded to it in coordinating these different players already, and we're talking. We recently enabled 437 standard compatibility, and I know we're working on, let's say, gathering some sort of ecosystem around. We already have the Guardians, we have a whole ecosystem of builders, we've hosted many hackathons, we have an accelerator coming out, which we'll share more at the end. So, what role specifically do you think Safe is playing here?
Um, yeah, so we've essentially from the beginning, but definitely since the spin-off from Gnosis, so the last 2 years, we've been very much convinced that we're not building a product, we're building an ecosystem. Like there is value in like the smart account ecosystem being built around one like interoperable standard or like protocol or like implementation, because that prevents fragmentation of the ecosystem, that prevents vendor lock-in as well. Like you don't want that now there's like MetaMask coming out with their own smart account, it only works with the MetaMask browser extension, and then there's like Trust coming with their own with smart account, and like then we lose this portability of accounts, which is one of the coolest things of Web3, that you can have a wallet and then use the same account with a different wallet if you don't trust the first wallet anymore, or you want some other features. And so for us, it was important to build this ecosystem of different solutions that may be targeting different audiences, may expose different features, may have maybe in different geographies, but they all build on a shared layer, on a shared infrastructure. But we couldn't just like deploy like the modular like Safe Smart Account system and say, go build the ecosystem. Like we first had to obviously show that this is something that people would use, or like we had to kickstart the flywheel around it. So we built Safe Wallet, which is a user interface to Safe Smart Accounts, where you can create smart accounts, you can use multi-signature functionality, spending limits, some like basic smart account features. Now it's also doing like sponsoring of transactions. So all the safe transactions on the Gnosis chain, for example, are for free, and like it exposes some of the features, and it has been onboarding a lot of people to Safe Smart Accounts. But the end goal is actually much bigger than this one entry way to Safe. So Safe Wallet is like one thing. Maybe in the very long term, it doesn't even need Safe Wallet as it is today anymore, because there's going to be all these specialized smart contract wallets out there, but hopefully all built on the Safe Smart Account and leverage its modularity. But they onboard their own user bases on their own wallets, and we have this ecosystem that then is interoperable with each other. It doesn't create vendor lock-in, and it also optimizes to reuse components, so we don't have this situation where too much smart contract code is written and there's additional risks of hacks. So it's optimizing on like security and interoperability, and that's essentially the long-term idea for the Safe ecosystem. And you mentioned Guardians, which are advocates of this ecosystem in our community. These are experts that have been seeing this vision for an early time, and we just nominated them to be guardians within the community to bring forward this idea. But yeah, we're quite lucky that we've had quite a few early projects like embracing this. Like you mentioned, CoinShift. I think it's already been 4 years that they've been building on Safe. Like others, like Multis, also were quite early, or Lin Wallet. Like, and we already have this massive ecosystem. I think it's now somewhere between 50 to 70 teams that exclusively build on Safe. and that contributes to this ecosystem growth. And it's going to be just continuous flywheel where the ecosystem is going to be like so big that it becomes obvious that you need to build on that versus trying to like build your very custom vendor lock-in kind of system, because you lose exposure to all that user base.
That's awesome. And of course, we are very excited and proud to be one of the safeguardians as well, and looking forward to contributing more. And so, being positioned as an ecosystem kind of core or coordinator, often we find that the unifying vision or culture or values becomes like even more important, right? What do you think brings people together in this safe ecosystem? You mentioned a couple of ideas there, the kind of openness and interoperability, right? And of course, there's a larger vision of like making Web3 adoption even easier and faster and possible through account extraction. Is there anything else you'd like to add about the culture and values here that bring people together?
Yeah, in general, it's definitely this the shared vision of making smart accounts the main accounts in Web3. That all the ecosystem participants are somewhere behind, but it also feels like the collaboration is a key part of it. Yeah. Like it's like this saying of like go fast, go alone, go far, go together. Like this is going to be a long journey, and if we want to achieve this, it's more of like a collaboration rather than some single team just pursuing that. And I think one of the key values of especially our ecosystem is the security and the like resilience, which I think will be very crucial, and it only shows when things go wrong how important it is to optimize for that. We've had the luxury in the sense that we've been building smart accounts for like over 5 years now. So we've been already doing that when there was like the big parity hack. So like a smart contract wallet that was hacked and like millions of US dollar worth of assets were frozen, and like thousands of teams suddenly had like their entire assets frozen. We definitely don't want to see this again, and there are probably other ecosystem or other teams that optimize more on like move fast and break things kind of mentality. Like obviously it's interesting to like explore all the, like, because there's going to be a lot of opportunities within smart accounts and to explore and ship features fast and to be the one that's innovating. And it sometimes feels a bit frustrating within the safe ecosystem how slow things move still. But this is by design for sure, because yeah, it's like by now there's so much value and traction on safe contracts that we cannot just introduce breaking changes overnight. Like there's over 60 billion worth of assets secured through safe. More than 10% of the entire USDC supply is on safe. Thousands of CryptoPunks. Like I recently saw a tweet that said safe is probably the only smart contract that if it would be exploited, that there would be that the blockchain would be rolled back and there would be hard fork. It's like not sure it could be, but it's definitely something which signals to us as an ecosystem also that we should continue to price security. Like that, there's definitely no room for error there in terms of taking risks on the smart contract layer.
Definitely, yeah. The further down the stack, the more important security and decentralization for resilience and kind of censorship resistance, all the good stuff that we need, right? Security and so on are important. Whereas further up the stack, innovation can happen much faster, like we said, with the different wallets and so on. And that will happen through the ecosystem that we have around us, the friends that we have made along the way. Of course, one kind of, I guess, sister or parent and related entity that has moved fast and has launched recently, really exciting, is Gnosis Pay, right? And that's, again, one key example where safe is invisible at the back end, and you just, hey, have a card, have your stable coins, go and pay, go and receive your receive funds, and there you go. At the back end is a smart account. And in Singapore as well, there's a really exciting card that has come up with a based app that again just uses Safe as an invisible thing at the back end, and suddenly now, hey, go ahead and use it for payments, use it for your everyday life. And so we do see like this kind of separation from the infra and the application layer. We're starting to move towards a little bit future looking, right? We have a couple of these like early launches. What other applications do you think are you most excited about?
Yeah. Definitely everything that's non-speculative. I feel our industry has been relying on speculative use cases for a long time, and it had its purpose also. It created, it meant that the industry is well capitalized in the end, because if people were coming in for making money, they usually brought money as well. But it's also, like if the only purpose of Web3 speculation, it's not going to fly. And we've seen early signs of this going beyond just like DeFi and able to speculate on tokens. So obviously, more going in DeFi towards like interest-based solutions, so more something that's less speculation, more like a savings use case. It's also, we've seen the NFT ecosystem emerge, even though there was also still a lot of speculative aspects to it, but it also has others like cultural and like art kind of aspects to it. So it just brought a new flavor. And I would just like to see more like use cases that actually impact like humans in the real world. And like one of this is definitely like payments, like Gnosis Pay or based, like moving less towards just having money circulate within the DeFi protocols, but actually being used in a day-to-day manner. So to payroll, to pay at the merchant, these things are enabled through these solutions, and they're also going to bring in a new type of user, because people that come in for speculative purposes, they're willing to overcome quite some hurdles. So they're willing to sacrifice on the UX. They're willing to maybe even sacrifice on security or privacy, because they do it in a calculated manner. They do it because they think it's like they can get more money out of it. But people that use Web3 more for the utility aspect of it, and that this can be payments, it can be social applications, it can be messaging, it can be gaming. So something where you actually want the utility rather than financial. Then you need to lower the bar for people to actually do it. Like you need to improve massively on the UX, you need to improve massively on security, and you need to improve massively on privacy, so people are actually willing to do that. And I think that's that's why it's also so important that we move towards like smart contract based wallets, smart accounts. That's why it's important that we create scalability, and that's why it's important that we have privacy. So these are like the three transitions that Vitalik Buterin also mentions. Like it's like they enable mass adoption, but they're also required for or like it's kind of both ways. Like we need to have the applications, and then we need to have these three transitions to actually make the people use these applications.
Yeah, let's go there now. So Vitalik talked about the three transitions. So there's smart contract wallets or smart accounts, and then the other two are L2 adoption for scalability, so things are really cheap and fast, and also privacy. So let's go to the L2 scaling first. Right now, we already see that the rollup centric future is here, right? We have so many rollups, and then we even have like company specific rollups like Base, and then perhaps application specific L3s are going to come out soon, since everybody has their own stack to do that. And like you said, we don't want it to be fragmented. And luckily from a smart account standpoint, we have that vision. But from the L2, L3 competition, it seems to me that that is the direction that we're heading. We're going to see quite fragmented stacks for different like optimistic rollups and how they do fraud proofs, how they do data availability. We're going to see different ZK stack or like recursive rollup, fractal scaling rollup ecosystems that are separate because they're going to use like different provers and different kind of like bridge standards. And so how will Safe evolve, or how will smart contract wallets evolve in this multi-chain landscape, right? And I know Vitalik touched on a possible solution, which is then this idea of key store contracts that you can control all of these accounts just from like one source of truth. Is this something that we're building today, or we're hoping others will build? How do you think this is going to play out?
Yeah, it's definitely different with the transition to smart accounts. Suddenly, accounts are in a way chain specific. So private key accounts, the nice property is that if you have a private key, it results in the same public key or public address on all EVM networks. So you can have one key, and immediately you have an account on all EVM blockchains. With smart accounts, this is a bit differently because they're actually smart contracts that are deployed on the blockchain, so they need to be redeployed on each of these networks. And there's like some tricks that can be done there where you can calculate the address where it's going to be deployed even before you deploy that contract, and you can, in a way, already use it to sign messages before it's even deployed. And there's some like magic, like tricks that are being done. But in the end, it still leads to challenges, and especially when we go into a world where there's maybe a new layer 2, layer 3 every day. This is going to be quite challenging to see how it all interoperates. And ideally, like there's some, like for example, on the optimism in the ecosystem, there's like this vision of the super chain where it's providing interoperability of everything within the optimism ecosystem. But then how does this play together with the CKEVM ecosystem? And like you're missing like the interoperability layer there. And also when you, I'd wish like if you spin up a new chain that there's somewhere like a checkbox, hey, also includes the safe like smart contracts in the Genesis block, and it's like super easy to just have safe support everywhere. Right now, it still requires someone to deploy like a proxy factory, deploy a single contract, and deploy this like entire smart contract system on each chain. It doesn't need to be like a specific team. Actually, there's like a deployment process anyone can follow, and it results in the same, the contracts being deployed at the same addresses in all EVM networks. So that makes it a little bit scalable, but it's still not perfect. But still, in the long run, the smart accounts actually enable much better cross-chain interoperability because they could do something like I mentioned before, where the contract is controlling a contract on another chain, or a smart account is controlling another smart account, different chain, and then you can trigger a transaction on one chain, use assets from another chain, and interact with a DeFi protocol on the third chain, all within one like user operation, one transaction. And that's something that cannot be done as seamlessly with private keys. So long term, I think smart accounts will be massively like important for like abstracting chains completely, so that the user doesn't even need to care what chains they interact with. But in the short run, it will actually lead to more complications and more challenges from a user perspective.
Right. So we might see a bit of a painful period before hopefully smart accounts can be one way to unify this walled gardens that are being set up between all of these ecosystems, all of whom want to gather their own network effects. And yeah, there are other topics around the fragmentation as well, right? One is some of the rollups do have native account extraction. Players like ZK Sync and Starknet on those chains or L2s and environments, how does Safe work, right? Do we have to do something different there? And also, I'd love to touch on if you have some thoughts around MEV. right, which is going to be huge. And if there's order flow that's happening in specific L2s and L3s, and the entry point is going to be the smart account or smart wallet. So how would that change as we also then have all this application specific and like a whole kind of like infinite amount of like rollups, L2s, L3s?
Yeah. Not sure I have too much of an opinion on MEV actually. At least I haven't seen too much being built leveraging smart accounts that's actually uh, like going to that direction. One notable exception is maybe the MEV guard that the Yearn team built. So they have um, like a guard, and that's like a separate type of extension to the safe. So we touched before on modules. That's like adding new logic or new access control to safe, and guards are actually then plugging into the transaction lifecycle and can have additional logic within that transaction lifecycle. So the Yearn team there built a guard. They're quite similar to the Uniswap hooks in a way. Maybe, yeah, maybe some people know that. But they build a guard that actually defines like who can actually put the transaction into a block. So they can actually say that within flashbots, like that only within flashbots the transaction can be picked up and they cannot leak and someone else can extract MEV. So there's some value there from smart accounts, but there's probably going to be more, especially on like also cross-chain MEV protection that will be explored. Yeah, the first question I don't quite remember.
No worries. Yeah, on MEV, it seems that, well, to me, I think this is new area as well. But then, assuming that because we are the first touch point, so to speak, and we get the first look at the transactions that are happening, and therefore the order flow, so to speak, from the users, right? Then, interestingly, smart accounts can be in a position to then like monetize that flow, right? Be it in like how do we share that with what kind of other parties, or how do we then facilitate some sort of matching or like solving between the different MEV pools of this fragmentation, right? And that's kind of like getting into intense, which we will cover later as well. But yes, the other part was around native account extraction and how that might change the game as well in this multi-chain landscape.
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge. So for like Safe is only available on EVM, full EVM compatible networks. So something like Starknet, which has native account abstraction, like Safe is not available because it just means giving up on certain technical assumptions, potentially even like security assumptions, and we didn't want to do this at this point. There's some teams that have been thinking about porting a safe version on Starknet. Not sure where this is at, but yeah, it's obviously native account abstraction would be an ideal case scenario. However, on Ethereum layer 1, I don't see this happening in the next 3 to 4 years because it would be too much of a breaking change, and like it takes a long time to implement these EIPs to this like low level changes to the Ethereum blockchain. However, on layer 2s, I do see there's ways to experiment. So that maybe some chains will implement ERC-457 style like bundling network, but as an EIP, so as part of like regular like blockchain clients that take over this responsibility, or also other layer ones like Luxo has like a native account abstraction implementation. Yeah, it just means, as I say, it's a bit challenging from just interoperability standpoint. Like, how can we have something that like as soon as we have deviation, it creates some challenges. But I think it makes sense because then we can experiment on layer 2s, and if we see something actually works in native account abstraction, then we over the long run move it down to mainnet.
Got it. Yeah. We will find more solutions to address like this fragmentation, and hopefully it does not come at the expense of user experience, security, all the things that we talked about. Another interesting area, which is also part of the 3 transitions that Vitalik has mentioned, and I still feel that is underappreciated today, is privacy, right? And it almost seems that we have taken it for granted for now, and also, or we are not willing to make the trade-offs. It seems that anytime we want privacy, we need to sacrifice some form of like cost or UX or the design is just more difficult, more complex. So how important is privacy? Vitalik puts it as mandatory, right? Like non-negotiable as part of these 3 items. But so far, among the apps and the wallets that we see built, even also in the Safe ecosystem, don't really see privacy as such a crucial element. So, what do you see right now, or how are you trying to shape the ecosystem in terms of privacy?
Yeah, I think that's probably a combination of things why privacy is probably the one transition that's lagging the most. So, yeah, I mean, one is the nature of blockchains as a public ledger. Like things is supposed to be public, so privacy feels like it conflicts in many ways. It can also conflict with composability, and it creates a lot of new challenges, and it's just a hard problem to solve. Another one is users are surprisingly not really caring too much about privacy, or too little, or too late, usually. And yeah, I mean, that's maybe because right now, maybe because we're still missing these more like real world use cases, because it's one thing if you just on ramp via an exchange, you go into Web3, you interact with DeFi protocols, and the long-term goal is to maybe off-ramp some of this again by an exchange and have it on your bank account. Then the only thing that you care about privacy-wise is that it's not that your assets are not somehow connected to your real-world identity, so that not everyone can just see like how much you have in crypto assets. And maybe you care about not exposing too much information to tax agencies or something like this. These are like the things privacy-wise people care about them. But when we have more real-world use cases, especially payments, obviously you don't want that anyone just publicly can see when you went to have a coffee or like bought something new or like this. There, people are probably more cautious on privacy, as well as things like messaging. If you have more like Web3 native messaging, you obviously don't want to expose your messages to other people, or you have your digital identity and you start actually having like a public profile that's not just pseudonymous, so it's not just a public address. I think we need these things for people to actually care. That's the second point, and maybe the third point on why privacy is still lagging a bit is it's a hard sell. So it's not something that usually is like the typical profitable businesses in privacy, or like because there's privacy is often afterthought. There's not that massive of a market, maybe like DeFi ecosystem or like wallets or like other pillars, and so that there's just less projects that are seeing opportunity there to make a sustainable business. There's maybe also less investors willing to invest there. There's just less of a group of people that try to solve these issues. But I do think like stuff like Vitalik's post helps change that, because it raises more awareness to the problem, which long term definitely exists, because without privacy, like we will not succeed.
Yeah. It seems to me that it is an emerging issue and a critical one that, like you said, people don't realize until it's too late, right? And then by then your stuff is out there, right? If you've made like so many transactions on, let's say, your Gnosis Pay, which I presume does not have a privacy feature right now, and somehow I can link it to your identity, suddenly I know everything you paid with. If I used it to, say, donate to certain political organizations or support certain individuals or causes that suddenly get persecuted against or discriminated against, then yeah, it's kind of too late to retract it, right? And so private by default seems to be important. I do see some real world kind of shifts though. With the latest Apple iPhone, right? They actually use privacy as one of the key selling points. So it could be that we're just starting that general awareness globally to focus on privacy, and perhaps things like AI will also start to then make people more aware, because anything you do online is going to be scraped somewhere somehow, and anybody can ask some sort of AI to tell them what has happened in your life, right? So what if one day I can just ask a certain chatbot, everything about Lukas Schor's life? Is that something you really want? And that's not easily available today. But in the future, where everything is scraped and used to train these models, that might be a future. So at the same time, we also think that it cannot come at the expense of UX and cost and speed. In fact, it needs to come hand in hand, or even like it needs to improve the user experience. Like, because, for example, with the Brave browser, right, one key selling point is that it's actually much faster and more secure, because you don't allow all these third party like cookies and apps and like things to track you. So if we can achieve that level of like frictionless and improvement, perhaps we will see more adoption. I think in the Solana space, which is more consumer focused, we do see something like Elusive, where they just like add on onto the wallet. You just like toggle, and then you can start sending. It's going to be hopefully much easier, and hopefully it will be the same in Ethereum ecosystem and all of Web3 as well. Yeah. So speaking of AI, just now touching on it, and I also want to bring back, before we talked a little bit about intents with the different chains and how MEV can play out. Now we're getting to like the distant future kind of predictions, which is, how do these things, like the idea of intents and the idea of AI or LLMs, how do these ideas change account extraction as well, right? With intents, there's been some thoughts around like positioning AA as a narrow form of it. Like, hey, you're just paying for gas, so you're just like removing part of the constraints, or you just maybe you're abstracting away the multi-chain component with the key store contracts, or and you say, I want to do this, and you help me do it across different chains. But will we need to have another shift as we see perhaps some sort of generalized intent layer, or are smart accounts actually intent layers or intent interfaces in themselves, and we will eventually become generalized? And now, just pushing that a little bit further, if we do become so generalized, can we just use some sort of LLM to say, hey, natural language, you're my AI assistant, I tell you what I want to happen, and you help me translate that into what needs to be done. I approve that, and that's it, right? So this is the last prediction that we made in our research piece around the predictions of how EA will evolve, and this is the probably the wildest one yet. What is your reaction to this, and how are we perhaps positioning or preparing ourselves for this potential future?
Yeah, I definitely think that was an interesting prediction. The like intents, in a sense, um, they're just a much more user friendly way to trigger transactions, because it's more about what the user actually wants. So what they intend, of course, but it's more about the what rather than the how. So right now, transactions are like a user needs to go to an app, and the app crafts a transaction, and it already says exactly what's done on chain to do that. But in a sense, the user just cares what's at the end of the transaction, what's the outcome. So I want that this other person has 100 more DAI, and I have not more than 100 DAI that's less on my balance. So that's like the constraint. And then you should just be able to give this constraint to someone else, and they then figure out how exactly this is done. Is it like a simple ESA transfer, or is it maybe doing some like magic like flashbot stuff and flash loan stuff is doing some arbitrage, and at the end, still the 100 DAI are on the other side, but someone else might have made some money out of this. Maybe gives you even back some of this, and your balance went down less than 100. So there's have this. This is the idea of intents to just move towards a more user-friendly way to do transactions. And AI is interesting there because it first off it helps translate like more like human intents into machine readable intents or like blockchain readable intents. So the user might just say, I want to send 100 DAI to this person, and then an LLM can formulate this into something that's more that can be interpreted more by machines. So it's more like send this ERC20 token with this token contract address to this person's address, which is identified. And then this more machine readable intent can then be processed by third parties, and usually these are called like resolvers or solvers in like the CowSwap and OneInch Fusion ecosystem. Not sure how they're called in Uniswap X, but like some group of people that just takes these constraints and has some algorithms to define what's the best path to execute that. Maybe also in a way that I profit the most myself. And then they can execute the transaction. And these stakeholders, these resolvers, I also see in the long run be controlled through AI agents because they can then apply much more intelligent like algorithms and systems to identify the best path for execution. So I see AI involved in two ways. And anyways, AI agents will have to be controlling smart accounts because, at least to my knowledge, AI agents cannot control private keys. But via like a trustless oracle or something, they can actually control smart contracts or control smart accounts. And also, you actually want this. Like, you don't want an AI that just has like can do anything they want on chain, but you actually want to have ways to restrict the capabilities, to build in security mechanisms, to say that like even an AI agent can accumulate assets or can trigger transactions on chain. They should do it within a certain sandbox or like safe environment. And then I see also like intent-based systems becoming less of I send assets to a smart contract, to a different smart contract, or I give an ERC20 approved to a different smart contract, but rather maybe I install a plugin, a module on my smart account, and then this plugin module is managing intents and has, in a sense, full access to my account, but only as long as they comply to certain constraints of the intent. So I do see this also as a pathway for assets to be more staying on your account rather than being fragmented or split between different like intent-based systems.
Yeah, so we might see certain specialized AI agents as modules. So when I want to have a new functionality, I just, hey, here's this plugin, and like here's an AI agent that will just handle it for you. Wow, yeah. That would be interesting. So coming back to a little bit back to reality, let's try to wrap up with some more practical tips, right? Right now we are in the middle, well, in August of 2023. I think everybody agrees we're squarely in the middle of the bear market. Some people think we are the very early of the next bull cycle. 1 year ago, last June, you actually wrote about bear in mind and what builders should bear in mind during this bear market when they're trying to build apps. And how has that changed in the last year? Do you still repeat the same advice, right? Or what would you like to refresh or maybe re-emphasize?
Yeah, I actually just recently read that article again, and I was surprised how many ways we were quite right there in our predictions. So the article was written in the aftermath of Terra Luna crashing, and us saying like this was like a paradigm changing event. Like we're probably going to be going into a long term bear market based on that. Like this means many things for many stakeholders, like obviously regulators will be putting much more attention to this. There will be increased scrutiny from regulators. There's going to be people being like scared away by what happened, and this was even before FTX, so that obviously then contributed even more to that. But then also like this has like a kind of chain of effects, be it like user adoption decreasing suddenly, be it investors being more careful how they deploy like money, projects struggling to fundraise, which may lead to layoffs. And like we outlined a lot of these chain of effects last year, and a lot of this actually happened. And yeah, one thing we also like put in there is that there's going to be a shift on from application focus towards an infrastructure focus. That's usually in the bear markets. We see more focus on infrastructure, which then is the foundation for next bull market, where in the bull market the focus is all on like what are users actually doing, where is the traction. Exactly. We thought we want to share some of the wisdom we also accumulated over the years, because it for Gnosis team has been existing already for the last 3 bear markets. The Safe team since the last 2. We have been going through this, and we also set up in a way that we calculate this into our planning. We want to grow sustainably in the long run. We know that bull markets are usually like a lot of like exaggeration, and then we need to calculate with bear markets, which takes a lot of what we've been doing back to reality. So we were set up for this, and I think we also could take advantage of some of the aspects of a bear market. Like one is it became massively easier to hire top talent. Like in the last bull market, it was impossible to get talent to like commit because it was just this war for the best in the market, and there was not enough people having accumulated expertise. This got easier for us, and we because we planned for this, we are able to scale up the team while others might have to do layoffs. So that's beneficial for us. I think I would just share some caution to teams that the bear market could take longer than they might expect. So I still think that the macro environment, like the high interest environment, has some impact, even though we might already have made quite some progress in exploring like what could be the next bull market themes in terms of like maybe gaming, social, account abstraction, intents. Like there's definitely things that there's a lot of opportunity there, but in terms of like capital inflow into the market, like as long as there's a high interest environment, like people are usually staying away from risky investments, and like this is just a self-fulfilling prophecy then, where like things just doesn't take off just yet. And I speak to a lot of teams that plan to like also fundraise in the next 6 to 12 months, and they are hoping that there will be another bull market which makes fundraising easier. And I'm just a bit worried that if there won't be like a big bull market, usually also the fundraising is a bit delayed, or like the ease of fundraising, so that suddenly there will be in 6 to 12 months a bunch of teams that even raised to like high valuations during the 2021 bull market that suddenly has to get new capital. And if it might not be that easy to recapitalize. So also just caution to team that plan to fundraise in the next 6 to 12 months, maybe start earlier to think about it, put more focus on it. It will be harder probably than the last one.
Right. Still certainly quite bleak, quite a heavy message that you have there, but certainly better to be mentally prepared and then pleasantly surprised than the other way around, exactly. Right? And of course, at the same time, there are still people and builders and investors around in this bear market. And in fact, Safe itself, and of course us at LongHash, we're still trying to support builders, even though the environment is pretty tough, right? So with Safe, I know there are plenty of grants, hackathons ongoing. And of course, recently we just announced the recruitment. So at the time of recording, we just opened the recruitment for the Safe AA Accelerator, which will have 200K in funding, right, for selected teams. And for the others, even if you're not selected, you still have a lot of support from the mentors and like the fireside chats. And so hopefully that will then still empower you to get ready to become sustainable and raise if needed for the future as well. So anything that you like to shout out for the call to action, like what should builders do today?
Yeah. Yeah, we talked about a lot of opportunities in the last hour, I think. Like these modules that can be built for Safe, I think there's modules that can substantiate its own business in the long run, be it like recovery solutions or yeah, like use case specific modules, automations that like can be quite big. I think we're very much looking for teams that see the opportunities there, and yeah, in general, just see the Safe to the project and the core team very much as a support. Like we're trying to support this ecosystem in whatever way we can. Like smart accounts will be coming anyways. We're just there to accelerate the process to that. So we do grants. We collaborated with LongHash for this Safe Accelerator, and we do also technical support, or like we have with co-marketing. Just come to us, speak to us if you're interested in building on smart accounts. We're here for you.
Same here. So with the recruitment as well, they are office hours with our team. So if you like to book time with the website at the website, you can go there and schedule time for our team. We're very open to speak to builders, and during the program itself, as well, we will be of course available and make our entire network available with mentors and fireside chats. So builders, don't despair. There are still people here for you. Keep building, and hopefully one day we'll reach mass AA adoption. Thank you so much again, Lucas, for your time here today. Any final words before we go?
Um, don't sacrifice insecurity. Like this is exciting, but that's anyway. There's no money lost.
Awesome. All right. It's been such a pleasure. Let's wrap up here, and we'll see you guys next time.